Brian Baniqued, welcome to the Invested Fathers today. How are you?
I'm great, Kenny. Thanks for having me on the show.
Brian, we have not known each other for very long. We met through LinkedIn. You reached out to me, had heard the show, had heard some maybe a reel or two, but I'm so glad you did. You have such an interesting story. I'm just going to tell my audience this guy's done a lot in the real estate world in regards to developments, building, selling, agent. He has a daughter who I think is turning 20 in June. Brian, excited to have you share your story and some lessons learned along the way. Go ahead and give us your high level overview of who is Brian Baniqued.
Okay, that's a great question. Most people know me from my real estate career, which I started back in 1991 as a real estate agent in high school, and I used it as a way to get my way through college. By the time I finished college around 1996, I started in 1991, I had become a lot more proficient and really good at selling real estate, everything from single family homes to an emphasis on multifamily. So started my own company in 1998 and brought on 8 real estate agents who ironically were 8 of my past clients who I had sold apartment buildings to and helped them how to structure cash flowing entities to pay for their mortgage and have cash flow. And it was something that I practiced myself, right? So I would sell clients multiple 4 unit buildings, 1030 and exchange them into larger and larger buildings. And then, of course, I would sell them a house under the premise that this cash flow would pay for the mortgage on their house and then cover life expenses, which is precisely why a lot of them ended up retiring or quitting their jobs, getting their real estate license, and working with me when I started my office in 1998 at the age of 25. And so, practicing what I preached, I went out and did the same thing, saved up my commissions each time, bought apartment units, always made sure that they cash flowed. And I'd work up my little formula between the amount of down payment, the principal, interest, taxes, insurance, expenses. And I would look at the cash on cash returns of how much I put down and how much I would make annually after all expenses, which then, of course, later as I progressed in income generating properties, would look at debt service, look at capitalization rates or cap rates. I'd look at gross rent multiplier, but that wasn't my big emphasis. And it was a something that I carried on throughout my entire career, just in as an entrepreneur, running a real estate office, running a mortgage company, running a property management. It was always about making sure that my expenses were covered and then taking the cash flow from my apartment buildings to just create a nice stable infrastructure. So this whole premise of building cash flow and net worth through owning apartment buildings turned into a great uh, vertically integrated business because I'd have clients who'd come, I'd sell them apartment buildings, I'd sell them houses. These clients would become my friends for multiple decades. In fact, I'm California based in Northern California, so the majority of apartment buildings that I bought, and I was fortunate enough to be able to start buying these apartment buildings in 1999, 2000, 2001, were really great cash flowing entities. But right around the 2002, 2003, 2004, our cap rates would come down and because our values would go up, right? Rents would continue to go up. So I found myself and my clients going out into different other states. We started in California and platformed out into Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas, Florida, New York, Maine. And again, along the way, as I would sell real estate in these different states, apartment units, taking my clients' buildings in California, selling them 1030 and exchanging them into larger and larger buildings, I found myself doing the same thing. So as I would go out and I would represent clients, I found myself buying 300 units in Texas, 86 units in Tennessee, 150 units in Maine. And through my own experience of being an owner, I got finally in tune with all of the terminologies for cash flow, for debt service, for cap rates. And this is what segued my career into being a real estate developer, right? So right around 2004, which is one of the busiest times of my life, between 2000 and 2004, I'm just running multiple businesses. I'm traveling all the time. So I start building properties from the ground up. And we didn't build apartments for rent because it was too difficult to do that. It just wouldn't pencil. But building condominiums in 2004, 2005 was very profitable, right? You'd build what looked like apartment buildings, but then you just get separate parcels for each one, and you'd sell them off to individual homeowners. And that was what we would call creating condos. My first project was a 64 unit condo project. And because I had this infrastructure of brokers working with me, we could find good deals. I had a pretty high net worth at that time. And so I would go out and I'd buy the land, get it approved through the cities or what we call entitled,
Mhm.
and then building permit ready to build condos. So my first project was 64 units. I was the developer on it. I had my agents sell it all off. Around the early 2000s, I also set up my own vertically integrated mortgage company. So as we're selling off these individual units, we're also doing the financing behind it. Whenever I'd sell apartment buildings or 1030 and exchange them to other places, we would also do the financing for the acquisition on those as well as do the representation. So it all of a sudden my life is very technical, but it's one big algorithm. You
Mm.
sell a property, you do the loan. You're also at the same time doing your own due diligence for different locations throughout the throughout California and throughout the country as to where we could place our money into these cash flowing investments.
Brian, let me just do a quick because there's a lot that you said. Maybe I can unpack half the first
Yes,
half, and
yes,
then
please do.
maybe 2008 becomes the like halfway point or transition. First off, start at an early age, 25. Where are you from?
So I'm originally from the Philippines
Okay.
and came here to California. And I grew up, I'm a California Bay Area native. Came here when I
Okay.
was 3.5 years old.
Okay.
And so this is where I call home, California.
I love it. And I'm over in South Carolina, so it's a different world all the way over there. The entrepreneur, like, I'm gonna figure this out sort of mentality early on. You bought your own units, kind of practice what you preach, like you said, as a realtor, you're selling things to people, but you're also buying things. I know realtors who have never purchased anything, but you saw something different and realized, hey, I could learn how this works and maybe making money for other investors. I want to invest as well. Let me ask you this. I have experience in buying single family homes for the last 6 years and have learned enough of what I more or less hate doing in regards to renovating and dealing with certain problems. What were some of the pain points for you that forced the different levels of upgrading that you can remember? Any stories of just, I realized when I did this for the 10th time, like I would no longer wanted to do this. Anything stick out in your mind as like big obstacles or pain points?
Well, what prompted me to start buying apartment buildings and getting passive cash flow from rental properties was the pain points of being a real estate agent, working my way through college in 1991 through 1994. And the reason why it was such huge pain points is because financing back then was horrible. You're looking at 10.5% interest rates, 11% interest rates. Half the deals you'd put into escrow would fall apart, right? So you're living from commission from paycheck to paycheck. You're a starving college student. And I found out like there's not always fourplexes in different areas. In California, where I'm from, the Bay Area, 4 unit buildings were a pretty prevalent thing, as well as duplexes and triplexes. But 4 units for me was the ticket, where I was
Mm,
like, I found that I could buy a 4 unit building with FHA and 3.5% down. And I was like, oh, I have that. And I'm like, I could live in 1 unit and then my rent's always covered. And then I have three other tenants paying me rent. And so I've always got a little bit of something. I don't got to rely on my commissions, which was the biggest pain point, right?
mm,
You could
mhm,
work on a transaction in real estate and it would fall apart. And so when I got really good at closing very difficult transactions, especially because now I'm not worried about closing the deal because I've got passive cash flow, right? And so
mm,
all of a sudden, that little paradigm shift of not caring whether the deal closed or not was all of a sudden all the deals are closing. And I'm because I had so many problems I was dealing with from 91 to 95 because it was a very
mm.
really difficult time in real estate. Now we're going through another difficult time in real estate now,
Yes.
but then that was a
It's,
difficult time, right?
yeah. And you only know it. So
Yeah,
as you're figuring things out, yeah, high interest rates. Oh, horrible time to buy. It's too
yeah.
high of interest rates, or that was maybe normal interest rates, I guess. I've heard that 10, 11%. That was normal. Like I've heard
Yeah.
higher,
But
but
the
you
thing
could
with
get
that
in.
is the prices were low
Yes.
because the interest rates
Yes.
were so high, the prices were so low. And when I look back, I didn't realize at that time I was buying properties at 10 caps, 11 caps, right? Because nobody wanted them. And so when I would sit there and I first figured out, I was like, hey, this much down, this much a month, my cash on cash is great. So I bought a fourplex, and all of a sudden I started sharing this exact thing with all my clients. So instead of when someone would come to me and say they want to buy a house, I was like, why don't you buy a fourplex first? And then
Mm.
we'll buy it. And then you could buy a house in 3 to 6 months, just like I did, right? And you just save up
Mm.
some cash. And I just do the math for them, like this much down. I divvy up their down payment money and say, you could buy 3% down with a fourplex and then buy 5% down with a house. And now you'll have a house in 4 units. And so that worked really well for me because it
Love
was
it.
this pain point of starving
Yeah.
and then trying to pay for your college that all of a sudden you're like, okay, I solved my monthly thing, but then all of a sudden I'm helping other people do the same. If you sell a house to a person, they usually don't sell their house until 3 to 5 years later. And so you're just constantly reminding them you're there so that they'll remember you. For
Right.
me, I would sell them two properties in 1 year within 6 months, sometimes three, and then they'd remember me because I'd always say, "Hey, don't get attached to your two fourplexes I sold you, because we'll sell them and we'll 1030 and exchange them into something bigger, and I'll be here with you to help you build your cash flow." Those It's funny because when I would say those things as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old to people, right? And that was a big pain point for me too, because I started young
Mhm.
and I'm Asian, so I look young, right? So when I first got my license, I grew a mustache to look older,
Nice.
and I wore a fake ring so that people wouldn't ask me how old I was, right? And then if they'd ask, "How old are you?" And this was back then, and I'd be like, "How old do I look?" Like, "You look 19." Like, "Oh, thanks. That's a great compliment. I'm not even going to tell you how old I am." And then I'd move
Oh
on,
my
right?
goodness.
And so those were little pain points. But then after I sold them property and then did the math for them, did these calculations for entry and exit strategies, all of a sudden they didn't care how old I was. And they were like, okay, because whenever they try to ask other realtors, so
You're
they
like,
just come back to me and I'd end up selling them multiple properties. And a lot of these guys ended up becoming my longtime friends. They, like I said, they were the first 8 real estate agents that came to work with me in my office when I started it. And some of
mm,
them are still with me today, years later.
that's
Uh,
amazing.